Good morning. Welcome. I am Melissa Ensign Bedford, a member of our Board of Trustees, and I welcome you to this Sunday service at the UU Church of Columbia. I am a white woman with gray hair and heavy set. We are a congregation of many beliefs striving together to embody courageous love, radical welcome, and deep connection, and we are so glad you are here. Welcome. We offer a live stream of our services and extend a warm welcome to those of you joining online. We strive to make our worship accessible, and you can find an accessible order of service with hymn lyrics included at our homepage, uuccomo.org. There are listening assistance devices with our ushers near the entrance to the sanctuary, and if you're on Zoom, you can click on this closed caption button for subtitles. For those of you with us in person, masks are now welcome, celebrated, and optional. We'd like to particularly welcome any visitors among us this morning and invite you to find our Visitor Connect book in the greeting area or in the chat. We'd love to stay in touch with you. Children and babies are always welcome in the worship, and we also have a lively children's program for all ages and nursery care for our youngest ones in the lower level. Children will be invited to a Sunday school class after our centering and time of embodied prayer. Let us now settle into this time and place together with the help of our choir.
Thank you to our choir, and thank you to Violet for writing that song, arranging it as choral music, and directing it. Wow. Good morning. I'm the Reverend Molly Housh Gordon, the minister of this congregation. My pronouns are she and her. I am a white woman with red hair that is very long on one side and very short on the other, and I am wearing a white lace top with a floral blazer over it. And we are here gathered together on a very sacred day, a confluence in three religious faiths that are known together as the Abrahamic traditions, as our Jewish friends and neighbors and members are celebrating Passover this week, the celebration and hope and commitment to liberation. As our Muslim friends and neighbors are marking the month of Ramadan, full of sacred fasting and joy in God. And as our Christian members, neighbors, and friends mark Easter, the victory of life over death and love over empire, it is indeed a sacred confluence of days. And of course, it is also the bursting forth of spring. Let us be a people of hope this morning amid all of it. And we do today at our Unitarian Universalist Church of Columbia particularly delve into our symbolic approach to the Easter story this morning in honor of our Unitarian and Universalist Christian ancestors. And so let us hear once again today that ancient story that echoes down the ages. Our opening words are by the Reverend Julia Hamilton. Spirit of hope, settle into our bones this Easter morning. Remind us once again that the dawn light is never a gamble. If ever there was a sure bet, it is the sunrise. Even stones crumble. Even grief changes and shifts. And death is a mystery that is certain but not solid. And hope. Hope is like the sunrise, eternal and bone-bred within us. We are creatures built by sunshine and cannot carve this hope out of our bones if we tried. And people have tried. Tried to entomb the light, tried to seal off the morning. Emperors and kings, priests and patriarchs have brought down death, certain but not solid, on any who point to a new dawn. In those fearful moments, we can be forgiven if we stumble and doubt and deny. But still, the sun rises and calls her children into bloom. Always, she says, always I will return, so don't despair. All is not lost. The small ways of petty tyrants never win. Place your money on the sunrise. For who are we to bet against glory?
Good morning. I am Isatu Kamara Bush, your worship associate this morning. I am a brown-skinned woman with dark hair pulled up and wearing a sleeveless blue dress with a turtleneck collar. We now kindle our chalice flame to represent the cup of community that holds us and the inextinguishable flame of spirit that unites us. As I light our chalice, will you please join me in the words of affirmation printed in your order of service? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning. I'm Jamila Batchelder, our Director of Religious Education. I am a middle-aged white woman with long, dark blonde hair, a turquoise blazer, a coral top, and a white scarf covered in songbirds. It's a beautiful morning. The children and I will go outside soon for a service Sunday, and we could use a couple more volunteers. I know you all are here excited for the Easter service, but is there one or two people who could join us outside? So no kids wander off. We've got one here. Oh, thank you so much, Xander. And, all right, we're good. We got Kirsten, too. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. So happy Easter. This is the season of rebirth and new life, and one of the quintessential symbols of this season is newborn animals. Downy and big-eyed and adorable. But there's more to new life than just cuteness. There's so much vulnerability, so much potential danger in entering this thing called living. A phrase that comes to me often in spring is how heart-achingly beautiful everything is. This feeling that the dearness and the fragility of it all is so deeply intertwined. Last week, Reverend Marley showed you a video of baby birds leaving the nest for the first time. This Sunday, for our centering, I want you to imagine yourself as those baby birds. So close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath in and let it out. And imagine what that feels like, sitting out at that precipice, looking out over an unknown world. Imagine the landscape before you, the blossoms and new leaves, the sunshine, the cool breeze against your face. Feel how deeply it calls you to join it. And also be aware of just how perilous it all is. The distance between you and the ground, the dangers that await, some obvious, some hidden. Feel just how tiny you are. Just one little being in this great, vast world. And there are no guarantees. How do you trust in this choice to join this world with no certainty of how it will all turn out? And be aware that you are not alone. Sitting along the edge of this nest with you are all your siblings, twittering away, discussing this beauty and this risk. And somewhere nearby, your parent birds are singing to you, trusting in you and in life, even as they know in their hearts that nothing is certain. For they too have made this choice before, and all of your ancestors. So just take a moment to sit there in that uncertainty, that possibility, that heart-aching beauty. And then at last, a baby bird steps to the edge, spreads its wings, and leaps into the unknown. And then another, and another, and another. And maybe you are first, maybe you come after, and maybe you are the last of all. But one by one, you each take flight and enter this world. Welcome.
I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. Let's do that one more time. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul.
Good morning. Happy Easter. I'm George Grimhowell, your intern minister. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a pale-skinned, middle-aged man with very little hair, wearing a very light pink or peach shirt, and possibly for the first and last time, a necktie with polka dots. Now, during a time of contemplative music, I invite you into our weekly ritual of stones and water. Those of you with us online are invited to a time of contemplation, and you may wish to share your joy or sorrow in the chat to be spoken aloud during our time of prayer. For those in the sanctuary, you are welcome to come forward and take a stone, and the stone represents any of the hopes and fears that you bring with you this morning. And drop that stone in the water, which represents the embrace of our beloved community. Those of you in person who wish to have your joy or sorrow spoken aloud may write it on a slip of paper at the back table, and then it will be shared during our time of spoken prayer. I invite you forward. Please join me in a spirit of prayer. Spirit of life and love, gods of many names and no name, hear the quiet song of our prayer this tender Easter morning as we open our hearts to unfolding possibilities. At the slow opening of day, we breathe in the early morning air. The unseen sun performs the opening act, a prelude to possibility, streaked in orange and pink. At break of day, we rise to wipe wintry slumber from our eyes, and we find the sap of new strength rising, rolling away the cold stone of loss and regret. At last, we feel the sunlight touch our faces. So stirred by warmth that invites us to life, we open the windows of our hungry hearts in search of the blessings of connection, the kind that only comes through vulnerability. How will we respond to this invitation that tugs our spirits upward and outward? Perhaps our attuned attention is all that we need to transport ourselves across time and space, across joy, tears, and light years, only to find ourselves right here in the precious present. Let us open it, this precious present, and be the red tulip that parts her lips to receive the bee upon her tongue. Let us be the fresh-hatched robin who, eyes closed in prayer, opens his mouth skyward to receive life-giving food. Let us be the tree buds who, sensing the frost has finally passed, dare to unfurl green gifts that will nourish them in summer. Planted in the soil, our palms turned heavenward, let us open the windows of our souls to transmit and receive the Easter message of resurrection that wing their way from soul to soul, opening channels of sacred intercourse where the pulse of life flows from sky to earth, from life to life, from heart to heart. Now let us open this day, this life, as the tender gift it is. Oh, what will we discover? Amen, and blessed be. I invite you to remain seated and join in our sung response, hymn number 396. I know this rose will open.
And we're going to sing it in a round. Once together and 3 times in a round. We're going to do 4 parts because there's a bunch of us today, and I'm going to help you, I promise. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
I know this rose will
Our reading this morning is Late March by Richard Schiffman. Again the trees remembered to make leaves. In the forest of their recollection, many birds returned singing. They sang. They sang because they forgave themselves the winter and all that remained still bitter. Yet it was early spring, when the days were touch and go, and a late snow could nip a shoot or freeze a fledgling in its nest. And where would we be then? But that's not the point. Do you think the magpie doesn't know that its chicks are at risk, or that the peach trees, their two frail blossoms, the new awakened bees, all that is incipient within us? We know, but we can't help ourselves any more than they can, any more than the earth can stop hurtling through the night of its own absence. Must be something in the sap, the blood, a force like gravity, a trick called memory. You name it, or leave it nameless, that's better. How something returns and keeps on returning through a gap, through a dimensional gate, through a tear in the veil, and there it is again, another spring, to woo loss into song.
Once there was a man who fell in love with his people. He loved their songs of blessing, which were the pulsing heartbeat of his days. He loved their faith in God, who was as near and real to him as a parent. He loved their feasts and their rituals, full of delicious foods and fasting and wine touched to lips with deep intention. He loved their compassion and their generations-long hope to see justice roll down like waters and peace like an overflowing stream. He loved their hearts, which had been broken open again and again by exile and longing for home, by suffering and oppression under empire. Once there was a man who fell in love with his people. And because he loved his people and because he took seriously his faith, he began to love in wider and wider circles. And he took his open heart to places most feared to go. And he feasted with people most others reviled. He chose community over wealth, and he asked others to do the same. He gathered people together everywhere he went, and he loved them until they began to love each other more deeply, more devotedly, with wide, expanding hearts. Once there was a man who fell in love with his people. And his people loved him back, and they loved each other, and their love grew into commitment to the thriving of each and all, and together they created a movement driven by that love. And word of that movement spread, and his people began to hope that even the fierce control of empire would crumble under the force of such a wild and growing love. That flowers would grow up through every crack in the stone, that the world itself could be shaped by what was soft and tender and full of care. Once there was a man who fell in love with his people, and once there was a people who made a movement out of tenderness and open hearts. And once there was an empire who trembled at the inexorable power of hearts flung open to the world, hearts that chose active love over illusions of safety and control, hearts that had nothing left to fear. And that empire knew that their stories of scarcity and division, their strategies of oppression, their violent control could not endure the overwhelming power of open hearts reaching out for one another with nothing left to fear. Once there was a man who fell in love with his people, and a people who made a movement out of that love, and a movement that caused an empire to tremble with fear and to flail and grasp to regain control. And the empire took that man and killed him, crucified him, reviled his name, and the people who had dared to hope in him despaired. And that might have been the end of their story. They might have allowed their tender hearts to close and calcify into stone, to accept the logic of empire, to consent to the language of scarcity and division and fear. But once there was a people who decided to tell a different story. Once there was a people who refused the execution of their love and who claimed instead resurrection, which is to say the victory of wild and growing life over death-dealing forces. Resurrection, which is to say the victory of love over fear and control. Resurrection, which is to say the stone rolled away and fierce, uncompromising tenderness revealed in its place. Once there was a people whose hearts were shattered by the cruelty of empire, but who refused to seal them off in stone, who chose instead to risk more love, who chose instead to go out into the world proclaiming that life and growth would always win, and who would nurture a millennia-long movement of hope. Hope that even the fierce control of empire would crumble under the force of such a wild and growing love. Hope that flowers would grow up and crack through the stone. Hope that the world could be shaped by what is soft and tender and full of care. Hope that was a fierce answer to fear. Hope that may be our only job in the face of authoritarian control. Hope that is always a risk, the best one. For it is always a risk to love your people. Your people are so human, and so are you. Your people are so human, which means they will leave you by choice or not, which means they will let you down just as you will let them down, which means you will break each other's hearts. And you will do all of this in the shadow of empire, which is always whispering into your ear that it would be easier to close off and give up. You will do all of this in the shadow of empire, which will threaten greater deathliness the wider your love grows. You will do all of this in the shadow of the truth of death, which will eventually take your people away from you, no matter what you do. All the more reason to love your people. All the more reason to soften your hearts, even when it hurts. Even when love leads us to the edge of despair. Because soft hearts are why we're here. Risking life in a world that is both beautiful and terrible is what we do because we can't help ourselves. Because the stones keep rolling away, because life wants to grow and love wants to expand. Because in the words of the poet, we can't help ourselves even any more than the earth can stop hurtling through the night. It must be something like sap, like blood, a force like gravity, a trick called memory, you name it, or leave it nameless, that's better. How something returns and keeps on returning. See how we get up every morning and risk it all again. Because the only other option is to turn our hearts to stone and our hands to fists and give ourselves over to empire and fear and despair, and then they have won anyhow. So instead, we open our aching hearts even further. We claim resurrection, that something returns and keeps on returning. Call it hope, call it joy, call it connection, definitely call it life abundance, for sure call it reckless love. It rises in us and we can hardly help ourselves. Look around you, see the spring and all that is growing in the sure knowledge of death. See the earth in climate crisis and bursting still with life and beauty. See your loved ones making hope from struggle and wholeness in breaking. See your people risking love even in the guarantee of loss, answering crucifixion with open hands and rolled away stones. See them in Tennessee. See them here. See them in the streets. See them in your home. Do you think the magpie doesn't know that its chicks are at risk? Or the peach trees, their two frail blossoms? The new awakened bees, all that is incipient with us? We know, but we can't help ourselves. We are here to live. We are here to love. In her book, All About Love, Black feminist theorist Bell Hooks has written, "The practice of love offers no place of safety. We risk loss, hurt, and pain. We risk being acted upon by forces outside our control. It is a risk we must take. We cannot help ourselves." I remember a moment near the beginning of our COVID isolation when everything felt like a risk and no one was sure what to trust. It was the week before Easter, and my children and I had escaped the house to play on the porch, crazed with frustrated energy. I was just ahead of the kids passing through the door when I noticed one side of the porch smeared with what was left of an entire nest of partially hatched baby birds. I shooed my own babies back inside, unwilling to answer their questions about what had happened. And it struck me with extra force that year of risk. It struck me with extra force that wild creatures are caught up every spring in a great drama, balanced on a razor-thin edge between new life and death. And that while forces who would promise safety in exchange for obedience tell us otherwise, seek to hide that truth from our hearts, we are caught up in that same drama our whole lives long and cannot escape it. We too are balanced on the razor-thin edge between new life and death, both literal and metaphorical. And our lives are richer and truer when we acknowledge it. That new life is always a stunning risk, but that we cannot seem to choose otherwise. Not without hardening our hearts, not without turning our open hands into fists. Once there was a man who loved his people and who inspired a movement of tender, open-hearted care and who was killed for it. His story reminds us that we are faced every day with a choice. In the face of life, precious and tender and so fragile, we can choose the illusion of safety and control, or we can choose open hearts. We can choose separation, or we can risk love. We can choose stasis, or we can risk life abundant. Faith and hope are calling us on. Love and life are calling us on. And something within us wants to sing, Alleluia, let us risk love. Alleluia, let us risk life. Love.